From WNIN News, this is the Friday Wrap. I'm John Gibson. On today's show, WNIN's Tim Jagalow joins me for a local election recap. Our Kenton McDonald speaks with Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith about the statewide election results. Jevin Redman will be along for the sports chat, and we'll run down the weekend notebook. The Friday Wrap is next on WNIN FM with support from Indiana Public Broadcasting stations following the news from NPR. It's the Friday Wrap on WNIN FM. I'm John Gibson. Good to have you along on this Friday. Well, more than 74,000 ballots were cast during this week's general election here in Vanderburgh County, where more than 55% of registered voters showed up. Now, at this point, it's no secret who won big that night. WNIN's Tim Jagalow attended the Republican post-election watch party and filed this report.
As election results are finalized from Tuesday night, Republicans overall are the clear winners. From the national to the local, the GOP made huge gains.
All right, County Commissioner, I did omit this one. Amy Canterbury, 24,247. Hope Fuzzer, 17,881.
That was Vanderburgh County GOP Chair Mike Duckworth relaying results updates at the post-election gathering Tuesday night. Republican Amy Canterbury, according to continually tabulating numbers, will be the next District 3 County Commissioner. As the new commissioner, she says she wants to take a collaborative approach to the seat.
And to work together with folks to come to common ground. I don't have an agenda. I want to listen to the people, and I want to make sure they have a voice when we are talking about major decisions. And that's who I'm here for, are the people.
Canterbury bested incumbent Cheryl Musgrave in the primary election this May. Numbers showed her leading Democrat Hope Fussner as of late Tuesday night, and that gain never diminished. She'll work with Republican Justin Alpers and Democrat Mike Gable. Republican incumbent Jill Hahn will retain her seat on the county council. She plans to keep working on projects like the Veterans Memorial Coliseum and, of course, Burdette Park.
We have a lot of things that I really, really hope I get to be a part of to be able to see those all come to fruition.
She'll be working with new members, Republicans Joe Kiefer II and Ed Bassmeyer. Kiefer will join the county council as an at-large member. He says he wants to use his financial background to stabilize the sheriff's office pension fund, assuming it's still a concern when he takes office.
That's going to be a priority because that controls so much of the budget. It could impact a lot of the budget. So I do have some strategic policy ideas around that on ways to get that healthy over time.
Ed Bassmeyer has held several offices and will be the other at-large county council member. Other partisan roles include the county recorder and the county coroner. Republican Brian Underwood will be the next Vanderburgh County coroner. He'll run the coroner's office and use his background as a police officer for 25 years to help investigate deaths.
The biggest thing I want to do is for my staff to show complete compassion for the families of the victim. That is the big thing I want to bring to that. The thing I want to add to that job is I want to also involve grief counseling, not only for the families of the victims, but also my workers. You know, they see a lot of bad stuff.
He will sign the death certificate for all unnatural deaths in the county. Russ Lloyd Jr. is the next Vanderburgh County recorder. He'll have a staff of 6 and a budget of $650,000.
But I would look at some of these things and see if there's ways we can improve, ways we can make it more efficient for taxpayers.
The job of his office is to record all the property deeds, mortgages, liens, and other things affiliated with the Vanderburgh County property records. On the national side, Republican Mark Messmer, an Indiana state senator for 10 years, will be moving his office from Indy to D.C. He was elected as a U.S. Representative for House District 8. The Associated Press called that race Tuesday night. Messmer faced Democrat Eric Hurt and Libertarian Richard Fitzlaff. Messmer took more than 200,000 votes to his opponent's combined 93,000. He's a southern Indiana native. His hometown of Jasper is about an hour from Evansville. District 8 covers southwest Indiana, previously occupied by Republican Larry Bouchon. For WNIN News, I'm Tim Jagalow.
And we'll speak with Tim in just a moment. Obviously, it was quite the celebration at Republican headquarters, or at least where the watch party was being held. On the other hand, it was a somber night at Venue 812 here in Evansville, where Vanderburgh County Democrats gathered to learn election results. Many of them left early. I spoke with Democratic County Commissioner Mike Gable, who was unopposed in Tuesday's election.
It's so difficult when one puts out that much of themselves and have disappointment on an election night like this, but they've got nothing to be ashamed of, and all candidates, both parties, have done a great job.
Gable also told me that the two parties have been working together well here in Vanderburgh County.
I haven't noticed any partisanship at all on the commission right now, and I look for it to continue that way.
In a nonpartisan EVSC school board contest, newcomer Amy DeVries and longtime incumbent Terry Gamblin won 2 seats over a third candidate, Joshua Barnett. And in another nonpartisan race, this for Vanderburgh Circuit Court Judge Ryan Hatfield defeated Molly Briles to replace Judge David Kiley, who is stepping down. Briles will remain a Vanderburgh County Superior Court magistrate. Well, Tim Jagalow joins me now, and Tim, as we just heard, quite a contrast there between the two watch parties on election night, huh?
I would say so, yes.
Yes, indeed.
It wasn't just the pizza and beer that made the Republicans happy, of course.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, now we talked about those nonpartisan races. Let's talk a little bit about in your story. You mentioned that ballots were still being tabulated. That was as of Tuesday night, of course. But the vote counting went into the next day, right?
It went into the next day, and towards the end of the night, it was about 10 o'clock or so, where everybody was kind of like wondering, asking Mike Duckworth, when's the next day to drop? When's the next? Mm-hmm. And he was on the phone with the clerk, and then
the county clerk,
yeah, and then finally, of course, making the announcement, talking to the candidates who are waiting to see what happens, and then finally related the results of, like, we're going to get one more data dump. It's not going to be the rest of it, and they're going to start again tomorrow morning. And I asked him, of course, is this common? Have you seen this before? And he said he had not seen it in his entire career. Part of it had to do with the turnout, but also part of it had to do with what they were doing, right?
Yeah. The task of counting the ballots took a little longer than it has in past years. I visited the clerk's office as the count was entering the home stretch Wednesday afternoon. The office suspended the vote tabulation Tuesday night when it became clear the count would take all night. Remaining ballots were locked in a trunk with 2 locks, with a Republican official in possession of one key and a Democratic official in possession of the other. The tabulation area is also protected by a surveillance camera. County Clerk Marcia Abel Barnhart says the state's paper ballot requirement makes for a slower tabulation process.
We could use a faster machine, but the state legislature doesn't allow for it.
Barnhart remembers a time when the counting did move faster.
When I was here 20 years ago, we used the punch card, and they tabulated quickly, but we also had a lot of residue on the floor, so there was some questions of whether or not they were accurate.
Barnhart says the new system may be slower, but it is more secure.
But we've got everything. That's the other thing. The other good part of it is that we match everything up as we go.
More than 48,000 votes were tallied on election night, leaving about 26,000 more ballots to count on Wednesday. Even the partial results showed a strong election for Vanderburgh County Republicans. For WNIN News, I'm John Gibson. I filed that report on Wednesday. WNIN's Tim Jagalow is still with me here as we recap the election this week. You had county commission and county council races. We've talked about those. Maybe you'd like to talk a little bit more about basically how county government works and what those two county boards do.
Well, and this was, of course, a countywide election.
Yes, indeed.
And so we've got the commission versus the council, and basically that they are cooperating bodies, but essentially the commission is just 3 people. And of course, right now we've got Justin Elpers, we've got Mike Gable, the sole Democrat on there, and now we'll have Amy Canterbury. And it's been, I think it's shuffled quite a bit since I've been here for 2 years, and they're going to lose a lot of experience with Cheryl Musgrave leaving January 1st. She had a challenger for the primary, of course, in Amy Canterbury, who was supported by the county GOP.
Right.
But the commission
won that race. Yes.
Yes, exactly. And the commission. The commission is the chief legislative and executive body for the county. There are 3 districts, and they kind of have staggered elections, and they develop and adopt policies. They maintain all the properties. They oversee all the county departments, like the zoo, the Department of Weights and Measures, and they also operate as the drainage and solid waste bodies as well.
Right. Yes, and we sometimes refer to the county commission as like a 3-headed mayor. Essentially, they're the executive branch, but instead of a single mayor like you have in the city, you have these 3 commissioners for the county.
Yes,
whereas the county council, of course, is the fiscal board, right?
They're the fiscal board, and they're supposed to be the check on the commission.
Right.
And I always reference back to my Michigan experience because that's where I'm from. I don't remember such a government structure, but it seems to work pretty well here. I mean, there are 7 members for the county council, and they serve as a check on the board of commissioners, and they make the final decision on all fiscal affairs. They handle oversight of the county budget, so they've been very busy these past few weeks. They approve the salaries and the job descriptions, and of course now with this election, we've got a father and son duo on the county council with Joe Kiefer and Joe Kiefer II. Bob Dyke is now off the commission or council, and they've gained Ed Bassmeyer. Is it Bassmeyer or Basemeyer?
It is pronounced Bassmeyer.
Okay,
yes,
good.
Indeed. Yes, indeed.
Yeah,
all 3 Republican at-large candidates beat the 3 Democrats on election day here in Vanderburgh County. Well, we can talk a little bit about this race and how it sits in context with the past few elections or so. As you mentioned, things are a little different than what you were used to in Michigan, huh?
Well, the last newspaper I worked at, it wasn't the kind of place where there were challengers all the time. I think they've had the same mayor for like 15 to 20 years. Mayors are different in Michigan. They are not executive roles like they are here. But, again, very, very active. A lot of people running for positions here, which is great. I mean, and I've seen big changes happen with every election I've seen. My first was May 2022 with Noah Robinson, who won the Democratic nomination over Jason Ashworth. And he went on to beat Republican Jeff Hales in November. That's also when the county picked up Diana Merce as the prosecuting attorney.
Right.
And she beat longtime incumbent Nicholas Herman. It was basically an upset nomination. So she was elected. Robinson was elected. We also got Tim O'Brien in 2022 as that class, we'll say, of who were elected back then. And then, of course, right after that, 2023, we had Stephanie Terry as the Democratic nominee. Cheryl Musgrave ran for Republican, and she was bested by Natalie Rasher. So just big changes happening at every election, very active elections.
Yeah, and just these last couple of years. And the way the system works here in Evansville and Vanderburgh County, the mayoral election happens the year before the presidential election. So we have like 2 pretty big elections in a row. That's just the way the calendar lays out. We usually have or possibly have an off year where there's no local election at all. And then
my wife would love that.
Yes. For those who work election night until the wee hours of the morning, yes, they appreciate those off years for sure. But yeah, so in your short time, you've seen quite a bit change. I can mention that we did have a strong turnout, a lot of early voting this year. But again, 55% of the county's registered voters. That's a strong showing, but not a record, as the county clerk, Marcia Abel Barnhart, was saying. That's the record is somewhere around 60%, I believe, so we fell short of that. And as you say, Tim, pretty strong turnout compared to what you used to see in Michigan.
Compared to what I used to see, yes. And those were obviously concerned citizens as well, but I think that there weren't compelling races as often when I was covering them. And what's funny is that as I was covering the Republican side, while we do have a quote new president and now we have a new governor in Indiana. Right. It still felt like it wasn't as big of it wasn't as high pressure because we kind of knew what was going to happen. But again, a very, very busy race. Lots going on. And I enjoyed covering it. I also learned about those nonpartisan or those partisan roles that I heard of but didn't know what they did.
Right. Yeah, lots of moving parts. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anything else to add that we haven't touched on?
Well, I mean, like I said, regarding those partisan roles, the coroner is a partisan position, and we talked about why that might be. Should we not talk about it because we're not sure? Do you know why it's? Because I don't know why it's. I don't know why
well,
it's partisan.
I can't speak really to the state code as to why necessarily that is a partisan race. Obviously, sheriffs are as well, but obviously police chiefs, those are appointed by the mayor. So there's a wide variety of state code that affects various races. The school board races are nonpartisan. The judges' races are nonpartisan. These are decisions that are made at the state level, state legislators, and sometimes they might change. But a lot of these have been in place for quite a long time here in Indiana.
Right, yeah, even like county recorder.
Yeah.
Russ Lloyd Jr.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the idea that, voters should have a chance to, turn someone out if they think they've, violated or haven't done the good job. I mean, it's, again, it's hard to discern sometimes as to why some are partisan and some are nonpartisan, but there you go. Again, those are all decisions made at the state, some of them centuries ago, I'm guessing.
So I hate to ask this question, but what's next?
Well, what's next? Well, next year should be, like I said, one of those quieter years, I believe. Obviously, not a mayoral election, not a presidential election. It'll be an off year for a lot of things, including state legislature and the U.S. House. So yes, next year's election should be a much quieter one around here. But you never know. Sometimes referendums come up.
Proposals, maybe.
Yeah, other things can happen. Constitutional amendment proposals, that kind of thing. So we shall see. That is WNIN's Tim Jagalow. Tim, thank you for all your help this week. It was a busy election week. Always appreciate you coming on the Friday Wrap.
Thanks, John.
All right, thank you very much. Well, coming up on the Friday Wrap, as we mentioned, Indiana will have a new governor and a new U.S. Senator beginning in 2025. After the break, WNIN's Kenton McDonald speaks with Indiana Public Broadcasting's State House reporter Brandon Smith. They will recap the statewide election results and look ahead to the 2025 legislative session that begins in January. I'm John Gibson. This is the Friday Wrap. Hope you can stay with us.
The verdict is in. Hoosier voters are keeping Chief Justice Loretta Rush on the state's highest court. I'm David James, and on 2 Main Street, my interview with Justice Rush weeks before the election as she expressed concern for the safety of court officials after threats and attacks on her own family. 2 Main Street airs Thursday at noon, Saturday at 11, presented by Jeffrey Berger Kimrin and the Berger Wealth Team at Bayard Private Wealth Management.
On All Things Considered, the world is brought to your car radio, smart speaker, and mobile phone. Hi, I'm Kenton McDonald, your local All Things Considered host on 88.3 WNIN. As we spend our afternoons together, enjoy local news, statewide news from Indiana Public Broadcasting, and national and international news from NPR. Join me Monday through Friday, 3 to 7, and thanks for your support.
This week in This American Life, so many people this year personally feel like this election is up to them. They've been convincing family members who to vote for. They're monitoring election sites. They're canvassing. They're fighting lawsuits. This week, we watch them push to complete their missions. And we hear from some of the people who President Trump has vowed retribution against about how they feel about the results.
Mel Powell was still a teenager when he joined one of America's most popular big bands on the cusp of World War II, launching a brief but notable jazz career as a pianist, composer, and arranger, before going on to devote most of his life to classical music. I'm David Brent Johnson, inviting you to join me for Jazz Mission, Mel Powell in the 1940s, this week on Nightlights.
Support for WNIN comes from listeners like you and from Nob Hill Tavern, celebrating more than 80 years in business in the historic town of Newburgh, thanking customers around the community for their loyal support. Details on Facebook at Nob Hill Tavern. Be Sharp Sharpening, a locally owned sharpening service for knives, scissors, yard tools, and more, offering 24-hour drop-off service. More information online at besharpsharpening.com.
And welcome back to the Friday Wrap here on WNIN FM. I'm Kenton McDonald, happy to be joined again by Brandon Smith, Indiana Public Broadcasting's State House reporter. Thanks a lot, Brandon, for joining me today.
Always happy to be here.
Okay, so we're a couple days past the election now. Results have come in. And let's start at the governor's race. Mike Braun is going to be Indiana's next governor. The race was not as close, I think, as maybe some of the polls were suggesting a few weeks ago. Kind of give me an overview of maybe what were some of the reasons that Braun got picked to be the governor and maybe why he won by a wider margin than maybe some people thought initially.
I'll start with the second question first, which is, the wider margin. I think increasingly, and political scientists will tell you this, just looking at the numbers will tell you this, national elections matter so much to the stuff that comes down the ballot. And when the person at the top of the ticket, in this case Donald Trump, wins by nearly 20 points, similarly to the way he did in 2016, it's just the coattail effect there cascades down the ballot. And, I think Mike Braun was going to win. I thought Mike Braun was going to win before Tuesday. But the margin of victory has to be tied in part to just the surge that Donald Trump saw in Indiana and across the country. How Mike Braun got to this point is, quite frankly, built on a lot of name ID. He was in a very crowded Republican primary for this open seat. Eric Holcomb, the current governor, term limited from another run at governor. And so you had 6 different people in that Republican primary earlier this year, including some heavy hitters, a lot of money spent in that race. The lieutenant governor, a former attorney general. You had a couple of economic development chiefs who'd worked for various administrations who put a lot of their own money into the race. But Mike Braun was a sitting U.S. senator. People knew Mike Braun's name. They'd voted for him on a statewide ticket before, and he was endorsed by Donald Trump in a state where that clearly matters quite a lot. So much of the time we try to complicate things, and I think the simplest explanation here was the correct one. Mike Braun was endorsed by Donald Trump and had a ton of name ID that carried him to a primary victory. And then he was a Republican in a Republican-dominated state.
So looking ahead to the Braun governorship, what are some of the things you're looking forward at that he has talked about being some of his maybe top 2 or 3 priorities when he starts office next year?
So we talked to him the day after the election for a 45-minute press conference, which is a little unusual, a welcome surprise. I was struck by how much he really says he wants to focus on what he's calling the kitchen table issues that he talked about during the campaign. He was asked a couple of different times in that press conference, hey, your running mate, the current attorney general who was just reelected, they talk a lot about social issues like abortion and transgender Hoosiers and things like that. Are you worried that's going to distract you? He said, listen, they'll talk about what they want to talk about. I might have to weigh in at some point, but that's not what I'm focused on. I'm focused on property tax reform. I'm focused on trying to get Hoosiers' healthcare costs down. And it's not necessarily going to be a one-session answer, especially on healthcare costs. He acknowledged that's not going to get solved in one legislative session, but that's the sort of things he's focused on.
So let's quickly talk about his new lieutenant governor. That was something that Jennifer McCormick, the Democratic nominee, brought up in some of the debates. That was not Mike Braun's choice, and he has been has said some controversial things, and maybe has different positions on things than Governor-elect Braun does. Do we know what Micah Beckwith's role could be as the lieutenant governor? Have they talked about that or laid that out at all?
We asked Mike Braun about that this week after the election, and his answers were largely sort of what he had said since he inherited Micah Beckwith as a running mate earlier this year, which is he kind of, he'll do his thing, I'll do my thing, but I'm the one in charge.
Yeah, right.
That's a line he likes. I think the big unanswered question about what a Mike Braun governorship looks like will be Micah Beckwith. How vocal or not Micah Beckwith will be if he disagrees or feels like he isn't being listened to enough. Or on the reverse side, how much will Mike Braun be listening to Micah Beckwith? He said earlier this week that Micah Beckwith will be one of the voices he listened to, but clearly didn't hold him higher than anybody else. And also said that, he wants Micah Beckwith to focus on the statutory duties of lieutenant governor, which are numerous. Some of the most, the largest number of statutory duties than any other lieutenant governor in the country. There's only a couple who have more. So he wants him to focus on doing the job and, maybe not worrying as much about all the other extracurriculars.
We're speaking to Indiana Public Broadcasting's State House reporter Brandon Smith here on the Friday Wrap. Let's talk about the Senate race. The man who's replacing Mike Braun is Indiana's U.S. Senator Jim Banks. He comfortably won that race against Valerie McRae. We know a lot about Jim Banks already as a U.S. rep. He's one of the more vocal guys there on Capitol Hill. Anything that stuck out to you about Senator-elect Banks in his run-up to winning that office?
No, but here's a little scoop for everybody who's listening to this.
All right.
I actually happened to talk to Jim Banks this week in an interview. He's doing a few with reporters around the state, and I asked him, what kind of senator do you want to be? Is there someone that you want to be in the mold of, kind of thing? And he didn't talk too many specific names, although he did mention Tom Cotton, a current U.S. senator who was the first national figure to endorse Banks for Senate when he started running a couple of years ago. He thinks of Cotton as being part of this new generation of leadership in the U.S. Senate that clearly Banks wants to be a part of. But the thing that stuck out to me is if you've followed Jim Banks at all in the U.S. House, that's what he's likely going to be like in the U.S. Senate. He does like to get on TV and talk about how he feels. He's a absolutely, incredibly strong supporter of Donald Trump and his entire agenda, and I don't think that's going to change.
And Todd Rokita will be the Attorney General again. Anything that stuck out to you as to what he wants to do in his second term as the AG?
Well, it's doubling down on everything he did in his first term as AG. I mean, he made that very clear on election night, and to be fair, made it clear in the run-up to the election. And Todd Rokita is who he is. He sees himself as this fighter. The controversies that have surrounded him, far from dismissing them, he welcomes them because he spins them as they're just trying to take me out and tear me down, but I'm going to keep fighting for the things that I believe in, which clearly a number of Hoosier voters also believe in.
Let's talk about the State House now. Your beat on a daily basis at the up in Indianapolis. What can we look forward to when the legislature reopens in 2025? Republicans still with the majority, and any upsets across the state that we should be looking or should be aware of?
The upset is that there were no upsets.
Okay.
We went into 2024 elections with a 40-10 Republican-Democrat split in the Senate and a 70-30 split in the House, and none of the seats changed hands. There's still a tiny handful of unofficial race results, and there's one in the Indianapolis area that is a 66-vote margin.
Oh, wow.
So, maybe there's a recount there, who knows, but most likely no incumbent lost, no seats changed hands, and maybe that's the surprise of the evening from Tuesday.
One final thing, Brandon, I want to ask you about that I've noticed you've pointed out in other stories you've done over the last couple of years about when certain candidates or certain elected officials decide to step down midterm, they're replaced by an appointed representative or a senator. And one thing you've pointed out in the past is a high number of appointed representatives currently in the State House. Can you kind of give some insight on that, and if that's something that is concerning at all to either party next year?
I don't know concerning enough to change it because the alternative is either you leave the seat vacant, which feels unfair to the voters in that district, or the constituents, not just voters, but anyone living in that district, or you spend money on a special election, which Indiana is just loath to do because elections are expensive.
Right.
But it is something that I've heard both Republicans and Democrats talk about, how they're frustrated with the members of their own party who do this sort of thing, how they get reelected and then after serving maybe that first session after being reelected, leave the State House. You knew you knew you didn't want to stick around. Now, obviously, there are exceptions. You've had deaths in recent years. That's obviously not what we're talking about. But we're talking about the people who decided, I don't want to be here anymore. Or, I'm going to go take this new job. You kind of already knew that was happening, and yet you ran for re-election. I've heard lawmakers express real frustration with that, but again, because the alternatives aren't to their liking, I don't see it changing.
Okay. Brandon, thanks for all your work at the State House, and take a break this week from covering all the big races before we ramp back up in January.
The ramp-up starts for me way sooner than that. I'm ready to hit the ground running.
All right, awesome. That's Indiana Public Broadcasting's State House reporter, Brandon Smith. We'll be back after this on the Friday Wrap.
Lisa Vaughn co-founded Feed Evansville in 2020 to get food to families when schools shut down at the start of the pandemic. Almost immediately, it became clear that the need was significant and far-reaching. I'm Peggy Perro, and on the latest episode of Food From Here, we learn how Feed Evansville continues its work bringing food to the people. Sponsored by Swerka and More, enhancing the opportunities for independent living and a better quality of life for seniors in our community.
This week on Afterglow, I turn my spotlight onto a few lesser-known male singers, some would-be Sinatras, if you will, with a special focus on the work of balladeer David Allen. I'm Mark Chilla, and join me for The Voices That Time Forgot, David Allen, Rocky Cole, and Dino Canez, this week on Afterglow.
Hey, it's Luke Burbank. This week on Livewire, comedian and TV host W. Kamau Bell on how AI got his stand-up comedy style way wrong.
This material that came out, there was no mention of race or racism in any of it. And I was like, I don't know that I've talked 3 minutes on stage ever in my life without at least going, white people. You know what I mean? Just something. Something.
That's this week on Livewire from PRX.
I'm Roger Collier, music director of the Evansville Philharmonic and host of Inside the Music, the new podcast on WNIN. Join me and my co-host Bill Heminger as we share moments from our most recent concerts, conversations with guest performers, and behind-the-scenes stories as we celebrate the Philharmonic's 90th anniversary. Look for episodes of Inside the Music on WNIN.org.
Support for WNIN comes from listeners like you and from Indiana State Teachers Association, sponsors of PBS Learning Media, which gives educators free curriculum-aligned videos, interactives, lesson plans, and more. Learn more at pbslearningmedia.org.
It's the Friday Wrap on WNIN FM. I'm John Gibson. Thank you for joining us on this Friday. Well, now I'd like to introduce the man who's driving the boat today. That would be Jevin Redmond. He's here for the Sports Chat. Jevin, good to see you.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Thanks for joining us again today. Well, a busy weekend in sports for sure. The SIAC high school football sectionals, actually football sectionals across Indiana, have reached the championship stage. Jevin, perhaps you can tell us how we got to where we are tonight.
Yeah, still several teams in the area alive playing for a sectional championship tonight. We'll start in Class 5A. You've got North taking on Castle. That'll be at Castle High School. And the Knights are 8-2 on the season. North is 5-5. That's a smaller sectional in 16 with just 4 teams. So North and Castle still alive. And they actually met week 1 of the regular season at North. It was a tightly contested game. Castle won 14-11, so it should be a fun one between those two rivals tonight. Also in Class 4A on the west side of Evansville at the Wrights Bowl. Wrights will play host to Boonville. Wrights under head coach Corey Brunson trying to win their first sectional with Coach Brunson, and they're taking on Boonville. Wrights a heavy favorite in that game. And John, the matchup that everyone is talking about and has kind of talked about all season long is in Class 3A, sectional 32. The top 2 teams in Class 3A go head-to-head. Number 1, Memorial, at number 2, Heritage Hills. And 2 really powerhouses there. Memorial averaging 36 points per game. Heritage Hills, 39 points per game. And both have very good defenses. So 2 of the best quarterbacks also really in the state of Indiana, with Jet Goldsberry for Heritage Hills, Matthew Fisher for Memorial. So that should be an instant classic tonight at Heritage Hills.
At Heritage Hills, yes. Now, of course, Memorial is undefeated. What is Heritage Hills' record? Do you know offhand?
Yeah, so Heritage Hills is 10-1 on the season. Wow. Heritage Hills started the season as the number 1 team in Class 3A. Of course, they went to the state championship last year and got beat. But Heritage Hills number 2 in Class 3 at 10-1, Memorial 11-0. They're number 1.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that is a great matchup for sure. Well, also happening this time of year, while high school football is, approaching the finish line, we've got lots of college basketball going on, right?
Yeah, so the regular season got underway on both sides of town, University of Evansville and also USI. We'll start with the University of Evansville. Their men's team played at North Texas on Tuesday and lost by 17 points. Final score was 80-63. It was really a rough first half for Evansville. They were down 25 points at halftime. Did play much better in the second half, cut it to a 12-point game, but eventually lost. And the Purple Aces will be home tomorrow at 1 o'clock for their home opener. It's against Brescia, and it's also homecoming weekend, plus they have the Hall of Fame ceremony Saturday night as well. So a big weekend for the Purple Aces.
Yeah.
Their women's team will also be at home on Sunday against Wright State. They lost their opener on Tuesday at IU Indianapolis. That game on Sunday against Wright State is 11 a.m. And we'll just finish up with USI as well. Right. Their men's basketball team, last year it was a struggle, only 8 wins overall in year 2 at Division I. They've certainly improved based off their first 2 games, despite them being losses. They went to DePaul, which is a Big East school. They lost in overtime by 2 on Monday. And then last night they were at home against Bucknell and also lost in overtime, 75-69. It's 2 games in which they had leads inside of a minute but couldn't hang on. And I'm sure there's some mixed emotions. Yes, they're 0-2, but they feel much better about their team this season.
Sure.
USI men's basketball will play at Marshall on Monday. The last update is with USI women's basketball. They're at 17th ranked Louisville tonight at the KFC Yum Center in Louisville, Kentucky. 6 o'clock tip-off, and the women's team won their opener on Monday against Brescia at home by 51 points.
Yes, indeed. That was an easy win for the USI women. They look very strong again this year, don't they?
They do, yes. Last year they were the OVC regular season and also conference tournament champions. A lot of returning talent, so expect big things for head coach Rick Stein.
Yeah. Well, talking about basketball, while college basketball now is in full swing, I understand high school basketball is getting underway.
Yeah, it's the crossover season for high school sports now.
Yeah.
A lot of girls basketball programs throughout Indiana will play their season opening games tonight or this weekend, and it really gets busy starting next week. On the boys' side, they still have a few more weeks until they start playing, but official practice on the boys' side for the IHSAA begins on Monday.
Yeah. Well, let's look at pro sports just a little bit here, Jevin, while we've got a moment. Last night in the NFL, Baltimore edged the Cincinnati Bengals 35-34. That's the kind of game that will turn your hair gray, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And Cincinnati fans, I'm sure, are very frustrated. Their team's playing well, but they're just not winning games. Another close loss for the Bengals, and they got a score inside of a minute to make it a 1-point game and rolled the dice a bit, went for 2. The 2-point conversion failed. They lost by 1, so Cincinnati's now sitting at 4-6 on the season, but hope is not lost just yet. They're only a game and a half out of a playoff spot behind the Broncos, and of course many Colts fans throughout the Evansville and Tri-State area. The Colts are 4-5 on the year. They're home against the Buffalo Bills on Sunday. The Bills are 7-2, but for the Colts, a big game because they're only 1 game out of a playoff spot behind the Broncos. There's been some controversy. Should they stick with their young quarterback, Anthony Richardson, or go with the veteran Joe Flacco? They've made the move to the quarterback Joe Flacco. He'll make his second straight start this weekend.
Yes, indeed. Lots going on there. In the NBA tonight, the Indiana Pacers play at Charlotte. Pro basketball also in full swing. Anything else to add, Jevin?
Yeah, you mentioned the Pacers. They're in Charlotte taking on the Hornets tonight. Pacers going for a 3rd straight win. They've started a bit slow after going to the Eastern Conference Finals last year, but a very difficult schedule this first month. So Pacers starting to get back on track, going for a 3rd straight win tonight.
Yeah, all right. We'll see how all that shakes down. As always, Jevin Redmond with the Sports Chat. Thank you so much.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, stick with us here on the Friday Wrap. Coming up is the Weekend Notebook on WNIN FM.
I'm Maria Hinojosa. This week on Latino USA, a special episode in collaboration with Futuro's own In the Thick podcast. We take listeners through the historic election day and hear from folks across the country. Then a roundtable discussion to look at the results and reflect on what our future looks like. That's this week on Latino USA.
The verdict is in. Hoosier voters are keeping Chief Justice Loretta Rush on the state's highest court. I'm David James, and on 2 Main Street, my interview with Justice Rush weeks before the election as she expressed concern for the safety of court officials after threats and attacks on her own family. 2 Main Street airs Thursday at noon, Saturday at 11, presented by Jeffrey Berger Kimrin and the Berger Wealth Team at Bayard Private Wealth Management.
Lisa Vaughn co-founded Feed Evansville in 2020 to get food to families when schools shut down at the start of the pandemic. Almost immediately, it became clear that the need was significant and far-reaching. I'm Peggy Perro, and on the latest episode of Food From Here, we learn how Feed Evansville continues its work bringing food to the people. Sponsored by Swerka and More, enhancing the opportunities for independent living and a better quality of life for seniors in our community.
I'm Roger Collier, music director of the Evansville Philharmonic and host of Inside the Music, the new podcast on WNIN. Join me and my co-host Bill Heminger as we share moments from our most recent concerts, conversations with guest performers, and behind-the-scenes stories as we celebrate the Philharmonic's 90th anniversary. Look for episodes of Inside the Music on WNIN.org.
It's the Friday Wrap on WNIN FM. I'm John Gibson, and it's time now for the Weekend Notebook. Lots of things happening in the Tri-State this weekend. Let's start with tonight. It's Friday night at the Forum. That's USI's Forum 1. The film series continues tonight with a screening of Fallen Leaves. That's a quirky, award-winning 2023 love story from Finland. Admission is free. You're also invited to stay for a discussion after the movie. Again, that's Fallen Leaves, showing at Friday night at the Forum at 7 p.m. at USI's Forum 1. Moving on to tomorrow, Saturday, it's a Monty Skelton album release. That's happening at 5 p.m. at More Guitars on Royal Avenue. The local multi-instrumentalist, composer, and educator will perform at More Guitars for the release of his latest studio album, Monty Skelton, A Reintroduction. This performance will feature a live band, special merchandise, and even a question and answer portion after the show. Again, that's Monty Skelton debuting his new album at 5 p.m. at More Guitars on Royal Avenue on Evansville's east side. Also happening on Saturday, actually starting on Saturday, it's the Old Courthouse Craft Show. That's happening Saturday and Sunday from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. each day. It's the 48th craft show in the historic courthouse in downtown Evansville. You'll find crafts on all 4 floors and on the lawn. The event, we're told, is wheelchair and stroller friendly. Again, that's the Old Courthouse Craft Show, happening Saturday and Sunday from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Also happening tomorrow and Sunday is the EVPL Foundation Fall Mini Book Sale. It's Saturday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and Sunday from 1 to 3 p.m. at Central Library. Thousands of items, including books, movies, and CDs, will be available for purchase. Most items are priced between 50 cents and $2. There are some specialty items available for more, but again, that's the EVPL Foundation Fall Mini Book Sale happening Saturday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., Sunday from 1 to 3 p.m. at Central Library here in downtown Evansville. Also happening on Saturday, it's the Evansville Model Train Show. The event is from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the National Guard Armory on East Division Street in Evansville. Admission to the show is $5. You'll find 120 tables of model trains in all scales and related accessories, locomotives, cars, track, DCC items, photos, memorabilia, and more. Concessions will also be available at the Evansville Model Train Show from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Saturday at the National Guard Armory on East Division Street. Also happening on Saturday, it's Night Ranger performing at Old National Events Plaza. The veteran rock band is bringing its show to Aiken Theater Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Tickets range from $33 to $88. Again, that's the veteran rock band Night Ranger at Old National Events Plaza Saturday night. Moving on to Sunday, the Evansville Philharmonic Youth Orchestra Fall Concert will be performed at the Victory Theater. Both 6th to 8th graders and high schoolers will perform at the Victory Sunday afternoon at 4. Tickets are $15 for adults, free for students and children. And then a big event Sunday night in downtown Evansville, Jelly Roll will be live at the Ford Center. The music superstar is bringing his Beautifully Broken tour to Evansville. Tickets range from $66 to $205. Again, that's Jelly Roll live at the Ford Center, 7 p.m. Sunday here in downtown Evansville. If you have an event you'd like us to mention on the Weekend Notebook, send it to me, Jay Gibson, that's the letter J, Gibson, at WNIN.org, and we'll do our best to get it on the Weekend Notebook. That's going to wrap up this week's Friday Wrap. I'd like to thank all of our guests, including WNIN's Tim Jagalow, also our own Kenton McDonald. Also a big thanks to Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith, and of course a big thanks to Jevin Redmond for not only the sports chat, but also for engineering today's show. We'd also like to thank Mariah Winnie for social media support. A big thanks to listeners like you for supporting WNIN and programs like the Friday Wrap. And another big thanks to Indiana Public Broadcasting stations for their support. I'm John Gibson. I hope you and yours have a fine, fine weekend. And for this Friday, that's a wrap.